They can't be here. You can't be here if this is your guiding philosophy in life, that it's totally acceptable to mass murder children and to shoot them and to look the other way when they're trying to get food, to block aid, to allow a starvation campaign to get what you want.
Candace Owens ripped into the Israel first mentality in a recent video where she talks about why that twisted philosophy is so sick and twisted and has ingrained itself so deeply in American politics. She also gets into what sorts of things are getting many Americans to open their eyes to it for the first time. This is in a context of a conversation with Milo Yiannopoulos, so let's see what she has to say. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
After having, committed treason in the morning, to commit genocide in the afternoon, by saying, or by giving an indication that Israel will be fine to go and just annex Gaza, a place where
which is what Miriam, and by the way, just so everybody's clear, they're also going to take the West Bank. Miriam Adelson came to him and said, "No, we're not taking Gaza. We're also taking the West Bank, and we want you to look the other way. And here's $100 million." So they're currently going door to door and traumatizing people that live in the West Bank, right? Palestinians that live in the West Bank. And Trump is pretending he doesn't know that's going on, and now penalizing Americans who should rightfully be outraged that we pretend we're the leaders of the free world. You know what I mean? Everybody should want to live like us. So we've got it all figured out. We have so much high morality. And yet you look at what's happening in Gaza, and all of our politicians do not have the stomach to say what is so obviously true.
And what is obviously true is that by the time this is over, Netanyahu's Israel will have eclipsed Hitler's Germany by many, many counts, morally speaking, and probably by the numbers too, because the way that country is behaving, it's the kind of thing that people are like, all right, come on, calm down. But no, I mean it. The manner in which they are exterminating innocent children.
No, it has eclipsed it. Somebody showed that they were using this measure, Israel and their propaganda was using this measure for October 7th, saying this is the equivalent of, this would be like by rate killing this many people.
Oh, well, you get Mark Levine go on TV and say,
and they were like, that would be the equivalent of murdering 44 million Americans.
If Mark Levine can go on television and say that losing 300 IDF soldiers is equivalent of 3,000 American soldiers, I think perhaps we'll take the same approach to mathematics.
Oh man, well I sure don't hope it eclipses those numbers at all. This is freakish policy, absurd foreign policy, and they're right, this Israel first mentality is a plague, and it is so, it has been so throughout my entire lifetime, as Israel prepares to annex and occupy Gaza. And yeah, Candace is right. They certainly have at least signaled and moved in the direction of taking the West Bank, already occupying something like 60% of it, and then laying claim to parts of Syria and Lebanon in the grand dreams of the Greater Israel Project. That certainly is happening. And meanwhile, by the way, they're complaining about anti-Semitism, and that's the major problem, not what Israel's doing. Well, guess what? If you want to curtail or kind of draw back the anti-Semitism and that kind of mentality, the worst thing you can do is endorse the sorts of policies that Israel is enacting in Gaza, because Israel's propaganda campaign says that, hey, Judaism in general is the same thing as Israeli interests, which I don't buy, by the way, and because of that, they've gotten a lot of people to believe that. Well, what happens then when that regime commits the atrocities like they are in Gaza? Well, it's more anti-Semitism, I'm sorry to say.
Now they're not doing that approach to mathematics anymore.
Yes, they've said that. Trump, irritated by disrespect and bad behavior from Netanyahu, was signaling when he was here that maybe America would have a presence in Gaza, that maybe that there would be a Trump Tower in Gaza, not to Netanyahu's visible displeasure and surprise, saying some of this stuff, right? And how quickly we got to the stage where Trump has said, yeah, just kidding, they can have it all.
I think it's performative. I think Trump's family is invested. If you look at Jared Kushner's, the money that he's spending right now in Israel, I think that's what Trump is more concerned about, which is his family's legacy. Obviously, in my viewpoint, October 7th was planned. This is a false flag. They always had the fact that Miriam Adelson came to him before.
There isn't a doubt in my mind.
Of course it was planned.
Well, even Mossad has acknowledged the fact that they knew about an attack like that a year in advance, and they were tipped off by Israeli intelligence 3 days in advance that attack of that kind was coming. and Netanyahu was just about to go down for fraud and corruption charges, which still linger. And by the way, they just tried to vote out the attorney general that is pressing those charges against him. That might come out into an Israeli Supreme Court decision, and certainly a case there. So there is a lot of evidence in that direction, even if you listen to just the mainstream media reporting on it, like the Times of Israel. But yeah, absolutely, this is disastrous. It's something the U.S. shouldn't play any role in. Get out of the Middle East, stop the aid to Israel. Don't worry about real estate deals in Gaza, taking over Gaza for the United States, getting even more embroiled in that than we are today. I think that's total madness.
Israel has conducted so many false flags in the past, and then
It's not just
the
that,
fact
but
that
this-
he's being investigated for that, and they're keeping everything hush-hush, saying it's a national security risk about how he was feeding talking points to your country's going through this, and you're feeding talking points, and you're being investigated for corruption pertaining to what happened on that day. I mean, it's very obvious.
There are rabbis in Jerusalem today who are saying just this.
Of course.
There are rabbis in Tel Aviv who are saying just this. There's no explanation for the Iron Dome mysteriously not working after its flawless record. Why pilots were
He
kept
moved
on.
the troops from the border.
Right, moved that music festival to the border so that they had lots of lovely young nubile sympathetic victims.
But under the traditional narrative, this is all, a security failure. There was nothing that led Israel to want to behave like it is behaving now in Gaza. Nothing at all. This was an intelligence failure. We didn't see it. We didn't know anything about it, despite the fact that mountains of evidence shows that they did. And does Netanyahu take any criticism for that? Very little. There are some dissidents in Israel, opposition leader like Yair Golan and some others that have ransacked him for this. Haaretz has, dragged him through the dirt over some things like this, but not enough. He doesn't even take flack for funding Hamas for 13 years, beginning in 2012, with a mentality that, hey, funding Hamas is a good thing because that will prevent the rise and establishment of a Palestinian state, because no one's going to want to negotiate with a terrorist group in Gaza to do that. It'll destabilize the Palestinian authorities, etc. And I hate to say that generally was correct. He doesn't take the flack from that from Americans and the American politicians that are Israel first, Trump among them.
Why the IDF was grounded for hours in an area where they could almost hear their own family members in the nearby
Why they
housing.
intercepted the hostage plan,
Right.
and they just ignored it.
It is not.
Egypt's warnings that there's a buildup happening on the border.
Right.
We're just not interested right now, actually.
Suddenly this let me
We're
tell you
just not
something.
interested.
Mossad knows. I like how you call it the Mossad, which is correct. The
Mossad.
The Mossad they know how many American Catholic bishops are homosexuals. To the man, because I met somebody who works in Israeli intelligence who told me, oh yeah, it's 88%. I said, what? 88% of American Catholic bishops. And I said, what do you mean 88%? He said, oh well, we checked. I was like, what do you mean you checked? For them not to know what's happening on their own border is ludicrous.
Again.
It is unbelievable.
And now it makes sense, because when I very innocently tweeted, no country in the world has a right to commit a genocide, what was it, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago? And
Shocking,
there was
controversial
the
statement.
they were so reactive, which is such a, they knew what was happening the entire time. They had their people in place and to gaslight the public, their media members in place. You had people like Dave Rubin who reacted to this tweet like I said something so crazy. Like I thought that was obviously true. We should never be supporting a genocide.
Absolutely right. And people say like, hey, Candace is too little too late on this subject. Well, it was about 2 years ago that she got into this and exposed the truth about it. And that's a lot better than a lot of people on the populist right. That's for sure. So I'm going to give her credit for that. She also lambasted Brian Mast, sitting congressman from Florida, for saying there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian. That is one of the things that led to a major rift with the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro. So props on that. I also give her props for bringing up the Israel intelligence of them tipping Egypt, bringing up the fact that there was an attack coming and them not taking the precautions to evade it. And we are seeing the fruits and the responses of that inaction. And many people, I think, justifiably think there was a stand down order from it. And, we're paying the costs of it in America by financing this madness.
And I believe that every every moment of October 7th was planned, and not even just like months in advance, years in advance, that they had planned to expand Israel's borders.
It's reasonable.
Same time with what's
possible.
happening in Syria. Everything seems like it was part of a broader plan. And Trump, I have to ask the question whether or not he was aware.
What did he know and when?
What did he know and when?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. And to try to claim that there's this blind spot where suddenly they just had a failure of intelligence. But all these other things, I mean, this is a country that has gone so far, an administration, Netanyahu's that is, that has gone so far that they're now willing to sacrifice their own citizens in order to increase their borders. Well, where does that, where do I remember that from? Could it be the word Lebensraum? Could it be a country that did exactly that? And
yeah, the Greater Israel Project, in a way, is Israel's Lebensraum, and Candace is exactly accurate. They certainly planned the Greater Israel Project long before October 7th. That's for sure. David Ben-Gurion wrote about expanding Israel's borders. They always have wanted more territory than they have now. It's not exactly clear how much, but Benjamin Netanyahu and several famous photographs have him holding up a map that says future Israel, and it shows the borders expanded outward greatly, including even into the Sinai Peninsula, which is now part of Egypt. So yeah, we've seen that. It's been, brought up over and over and over, revived and invoked by Likudniks and, a lot of the Zionists involved in this mad project. And part of the reason for that is the genocide in Gaza. They believe that this will drive them toward a greater Israel if they occupy that, which they're planning to do right now. Netanyahu said the decision's been made. And guess who hasn't complained? The United States government. Guess who still funnels money to them after that? The United States government.
Makes me wonder, it reminds me of why we don't give the victims of crime power over sentencing of the perpetrators, because if the Jewish people suffered to whatever extent people have their own ideas about that under the Nazis, under the Third Reich, and have held on to that as a core part of their identity, their victimization at the hands of the Nazis, which to some degree of course happened, and define themselves according to that victimhood. They're the last people you want to give a gun to.
Well, or the Bolsheviks who magically disappeared and may have reappeared, laundering themselves through as like there actually were Jewish victims during World War II. And then there were people like Elie Wiesel and Robert Maxwell who may have actually been, working for other people, doing demonic things. And then they just said, oh, no, we were victims too. That's my perception. We know for a fact that some of the Bolsheviks were protected in Israel and these people were mass murdering Christians, So you start to ask the question, that can't leave you, right? When you have this spirit of just murder and lying and deception and gaslighting.
But you're encouraged by the mythology that despite the terrible things that you do, you are history's greatest victims. And therefore anything you do is somehow justified. This is why we don't give rape victims the power to decide if their rapist, goes away for life or gets the death penalty. Why we don't give orphans guns. Because...
And they certainly don't give Palestinians guns, by the way. Gun control is extremely strict, not only in Gaza, but in general Israel as well. And, that's to prevent them from rising up. They have this blockade in place to block out food in addition to the weapons, to choke the checkpoints, not allow most Gazans to flow through, subjugating them, keeping them in something of an open-air prison, controlling the flow of electricity and power, which they just shut down at will. That's always the enactment of a tyrannical regime, and Israel's doing that with the support of the United States, with support of Uncle Sam, of course. If Trump wanted to use leverage against them, just say, hey, we're going to cut off your funding. I'm going to whip both houses of Congress to do that and support that. I'm going to shun the Israel lobby. How much that can happen is perhaps utopian, but that would be the leverage move that you'd want to use, and I don't see any U.S. president ever doing that.
We need grown-ups in the room to decide what's reasonable and to hand or to allow the acquisition of nuclear weapons in the hands of a rogue state that murders its own people by omission or commission, that has the ability to take out cities and that believes that its people are history's great victims. This cannot be allowed.
No, it's
Yeah, Israel, the only country in the Middle East with a secret nuclear weapons program. Remember, just a few weeks ago, they were waging war on the basis that another country in the Middle East, Iran, had a secret nuclear weapons program. Just think about how absurd that is, and they stole that technology, despite the fact that the US president at the time, in the 60s, JFK, did not want that to happen. JFK made strides to try to prevent that, but the Domina project unfolded anyways. They acquired nukes, and we're just supposed to have no problem with that. There's a special carve-out for Israel that they're not even subject to IAEA inspections, but we're supposed to go to war on their behalf to remove the possibility of future nukes from other countries in the Middle East. Think about that.
it's completely crazy. And this is definitively what Trump, his entire legacy is over. I think it really is over. I think MAGA is over. There's no question. I mean, MAGA with Trump, I guess, leading the movement is completely over. What MAGA will become in the future is kind of what the question is going to be, because we're going to have to pivot and recognize whether or not we can emerge as something else. I want to kind of get into what everybody else, the MAGA originals, the patristics of MAGA, if you will. Steve Bannon tweeted, I don't know if we have his tweet, which I thought was very interesting, but he tweeted essentially Israel first. Obviously, everyone's recognizing that as it pertains to what they tried to...
Meaning it, I think, as a criticism.
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah, he said Israel first. Yeah, I should be clear. Tongue in cheek, Israel first. And in response to this FEMA policy, they obviously, Israel first. He sees him shaking hands. Trump.
Just think about this. This is one of the architects of MAGA. One of the guys that formulated the original coalition behind Trump is now saying Israel first, scoffing at the president for these absurd, gestures, just remaining tied to Israel at the hip in every regard when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to Iran, when it comes to Yemen, when it comes to literally everything. This is Steve Bannon, close friend of Trump. He's a Trump supporter, and he's tweeting this. This is indicative of a sea change. And what Candace Owens is saying, and what Tucker Carlson is saying. There are major figures on the right and major activists that are having a sincere problem about this. And the spillover, I just don't think can be ignored. When you have Dave Smith at Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's organization, saying that, the Israel first mentality isn't the way to go and criticizing Israel is good, and that it's not anti-Semitic, and he got applause there. There is something changing, man. And I think it's a good thing. It's the only silver lining to the death and destruction that's happening in Gaza, which I would never want to happen for this silver lining, but that's where we are.
Trump has finally betrayed America. And yeah, there was this revolution, which I'm proud of, by the way, because I think it shows that MAGA is not a cult, that people are outraged, that he is not a king, that we will say that he's gone way too far.
And the only way to address it is to undo the mistake that was made in the first place.
Yeah, but then where are those Israelis going to go? Because I personally, like, people that turn the other cheek when they're like murdering children is not, I wouldn't want them as a neighbor, like, personally. I'm just saying.
Listen,
and again, I want to be clear, it's not all Israelis. Like, obviously the Haaretz has been every day hitting at all of the lies, and obviously they want Netanyahu, but many of them are okay with what's happening. Too many of them are okay with what's happening in Gaza. I think the majority of them are okay with what's happening in Gaza. That's terrifying. I don't want that person as a neighbor. Any person, I don't even want the Americans that are supporting us as neighbors. I'm basically going, okay, where should we send these people? They can't be here. You can't be here if this is your guiding philosophy in life, that it's totally acceptable to mass murder children and to shoot them and to look the other way when they're trying to get food, to block aid, to allow a starvation campaign to get what you want. You need to leave America, by the way. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no doubt, man. She was on fire there, and I wasn't even sure what Milo's take is on this, but this is true. Trump has tarnished his legacy, or what remained of it. I've never been a big fan at all, but I don't gloat about it. I know some distance believed he was the only choice because, in a way, what she said was right about, hey, MAGA is not a cult. Maybe certain parts of it are. I mean, you do see, damage control going on 24/7 by the likes of guys like DC Drano and Cat Turd on Twitter, making excuses for everything under the sun, no matter how many times Trump does a 180 on his previous commitments and promises that he unveiled during the campaign season. But a lot of it is not like that. And maybe it's not right to call that MAGA then. Maybe it's just right to call it, the dissident right or Trump supporters in general that do do have serious problems with the Israel connection, the Israel problem, the fact that the U.S. is tied to the hip of Israel in every regard and every policy, some of which I've talked about earlier, especially going into this occupation of Gaza, which Netanyahu has said is going to happen. It's always been part of Greater Israel, but also the cover-up, the Epstein files cover-up, rearming Ukraine after talking so much about how he just wants the killing to stop there. He just wants people to stop dying, but let's still just rearm the Ukrainians and maintain the same status quo Biden policy of keeping the arms, intelligence, and money flowing into the pockets of Zelensky. Is that really what we want? Is that really America first? And some people on that side have had, the gumption to, bring that up, to expose that, to hold Trump accountable. Of course, Trump doesn't seem to care about those people anymore. Those are his fake supporters, he said in the Epstein story case. The people that still want answers about this, they're not my supporters. They're just fake supporters. They must have believed in the Russiagate hoax, too. That's Trump for you. Meanwhile, he surrounds himself with people like Lindsey Graham, who he golfs with, chooses Graham's side on foreign policy in almost every regard. And then he blasts people like Thomas Massie and Rand Paul, who, by the way, had his back over the Russiagate fiasco, but just want to hold him accountable to his best campaign promises, like unveiling the Epstein files and stopping the war in Ukraine and not launching new wars as he did in Iran, which I don't think we've heard the last of, by the way, because it's been my whole life that Netanyahu's talked about how many seconds, days, minutes that the Ayatollahs are away from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Of course, that's absurd anyways. But that's where we're at. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I think Candace is right on the money here. I didn't know what Milo's stance was for the most part. But yeah, this is sick and twisted. I know some Republicans are becoming opportunistic by blasting Israel now, but Candace was ahead of the curve on this. 2 years ago, for a lot of the MAGA base, really shows that she was ahead of things. I'm not saying that, 2 years ago, that's so long. I know a lot of people watching this have been lifelong adversaries of the Israel first mentality and endless aid to Israel. Congrats to you, man. But this sea change is still worthy of bringing up, calling out, and being pleased by, despite all the utter insanity and death and destruction that's happening in Gaza. But I do want to hear from what you guys think. Let me know down below. Is Candace Owens right about this? Is Trump's legacy tarnished forever? Is the Israel first mentality wicked and sick? Are more people on the right waking up to this? Where is this going to go? Where is this going to end? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Candace also. She's awesome. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel. I'll tip my hat to you for that and thank you profusely. But also, I'll give you a gift in return for that. I will give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on my channel. So until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.